This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the third episode of the X-Cast X-Files Podwatch covering Conduit and the Jersey Devil. So these are our bite-sized looks at the X-Files as we get ready for the new episodes coming in 2018. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Knowles. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. For those of you who don't know, Chris co-authored a book called The Complete X-Files. And Chris, you also have your own blog called The Secret Sun. Can you just tell us a bit about that, please? I know there's some X-Files stuff on there.
What The Secret Sun sort of basically is about is looking at mythological themes that play out, in the media today, and how these very old storylines seem to recur throughout history and throughout the media, and they seem to be hardwired into the human consciousness. So what I basically do, for the most part, on The Secret Sun is look at things going on in the media, in the news, and put them in sort of a mythological context. The thing that really started me in all this was looking at the ancient mythological themes in the X-Files.
Yeah.
The mythology is sort of, it's a double statement because there is the mythology proper, the storyline with Mulder and Scully and the Syndicate and the alien colonization, but there's also very deliberate uses of ancient mythology that bolster that.
So if that's piqued anyone's interest in your blog, what's the address? Where do they find it?
It's secretsun.blogspot.com.
Today we're looking at two early episodes. We're in October 1993, which is when both of these episodes first aired. And the first one is Conduit, episode 4 of season 1.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh, good. It was written by Howard Gordon and Alex Ganzer, and it was their first script for the series.
Correct.
And it was directed by Daniel Sackheim. And of course, this is the episode in which a teenager named Ruby Morris goes missing. And Mulder comes to believe that her younger brother has become a medium of sorts for alien transmissions. Okay, Chris, so if it's one of your favourites, tell me what you like about it so much.
So many things I like about this. First of all, this was a storyline that Chris Carter had the idea for. I think he was a bit hesitant to give it to Howard Gordon, and Howard Gordon was a bit hesitant to take it on. Apparently, they were very nervous about the execution because it was a subject matter that neither one of them had written before.
Yeah.
But he was, I know that Carter was delighted with the end product. I really consider this the first real mythology episode. We really get a sense of how important the disappearance of Mulder's sister is to his quest.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I think we see also how compassionate Scully is, and the first wellings up of this love, this platonic love at first, which later becomes a romantic love between the two. That great scene on the street when she says, "Mulder, stop running after your sister." I think that's one of the greatest lines in the history of the series. It so perfectly encapsulates, what this story is about, who these characters are, what drives them, where they're going, in I think in a really powerful way.
Yeah, that's right. And because in a later episode, Oubliette, they'll have a similar exchange, and at that point, Mulder sort of comes back at her. But in this episode, Scully's remark goes slightly unchallenged in that sense.
Well, what he basically replies to her is, come with me or don't come with me.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned Oubliette, because Oubliette draws very heavily on the myth of Persephone being abducted by Hades, which was actually repeated in I Want to Believe, in the movie I Want to Believe. The idea of the maiden being abducted and brought to the underworld. I mean, literally the Oubliette is this door into the underworld. And, there's the red light. The symbology there is really powerful. I mean, that for a long time was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, but to turn back just to Conduit, like you say, it's a significant episode because of the development of the Samantha Mulder aspect of things. Later on in the series, Little Green Men comes along and contradicts some of the details we get here.
Carter had a very interesting sort of take on this. It was like Mulder's memories are amorphous, and they sort of come to him through dreams and through hypnosis sessions. So I maybe that's a bit of a dodge, but see, that sort of works in the context of the alien abduction lore and that whole subculture, that memory it's negotiable. So even if there are these contradictions, I mean, how is Mulder actually accessing this material? He's accessing these memories through hypnosis and through things that aren't necessarily what we would consider solid, fixed documentation of a past event.
I heard that Glenn Morgan and James Wong were quite apologetic to Howard Gordon when they realized later on that they'd contradicted Conduit.
And also the abduction narrative in Little Green Men contradicts what Mulder said in the pilot, that Samantha was abducted from her bedroom. So, but again, you have this idea of Mulder's memories and use of hypnosis. You can sort of give them a little leeway here, because his accessing of these memories is amorphous and almost dreamlike. There's a very important aspect to the X-Files that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that everything is POV storytelling. So every time you see a scene, you're basically seeing somebody's perception of that reality. It's not necessarily reality. I mean, reality is not fixed in the X-Files. It's shifting. So Mulder's memories might change from time to time because this was a traumatic experience that happened in his youth. He's not going to have necessarily a clear lock on how this event actually went down. And I think in the context of Conduit, I think that really works because he's so identifying his sister to this other narrative that he's being influenced by this. And I think this is the really powerful aspect of the X-Files that really goes unremarked, is that these characters really process what they're experiencing. And, you know, that great example also of Oubliette, that Mulder's engagement with this case is so colored by his past that everyone around him thinks he's being completely insane and completely irresponsible. And I think that you also see that same thing in Conduit. I think this is where that idea first really flowers, that Mulder's past, his trauma, his experience, really very powerfully influences how he approaches a case.
Yeah, let's focus on a couple of aspects specifically. And there's a scene in this episode which I think is quintessential X-Files, actually, which is the scene with the little boy. With the sort of mosaic that he's made of the signals he's been receiving, and you can only see it. Oh, Scully sees it from when she goes up the staircase. Point of view. Yeah, I like the fact that sometimes in the X-Files the truth will only be visible or will only be revealed to you when you pull back and look at it from another angle, and that's what this scene sort of encapsulates for me.
Yeah, that's a very powerful moment, and it's funny. There's also a counterpart or a counterpoint to that scene where they're at the lake and they're looking for Ruby's mother, and they find Kevin and they see the lights coming over the hill, and your immediate reaction is, oh my God, there's a UFO coming, and then it just turns out to be a bunch of bikers. So it's like that's almost like you pull back and you see the reality of Ruby. You pull back, you think you see a UFO, but in close-up, it's just a mundane, everyday kind of event. So I think that's an interesting. I think it's very interesting how they sequence that, and that's what I'm saying. These are really good writers. These are guys who really get inside a story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And another thing I like about this episode is at the end. That in this episode you've got the guest actress Carrie Snodgrass, and I think she must be the first Oscar-nominated actress who appeared on the X-Files, because she had a nomination for the film Diary of a Mad Housewife. But what I like about the ending is that in this episode the truth is withheld by basically a mother's protection rather than some kind of grand government conspiracy that shuts things down. here, Mulder can't learn anymore because Ruby's mother won't allow it.
Yeah, I think that's a very human moment. And this is why the X-Files is so different from other television series, especially at that time, because other series would go for the grand reveal and the grand heroic moment where our hero, our protagonist, wins over the reluctant mother by the force of his argument. And Chris Carter was very adamant that Mulder is not a superhero. He's not infallible. He's not omniscient. And that's why you hear him saying so often throughout the series, I don't know. He'll get Scully will ask him this question, like, what does this mean? Like, she would expect him to know. And he's like, I don't know. And I think that's what makes him such a great character, is that he's not Sherlock Holmes. He's somebody who's bumbling around in the dark. And, there's an interesting subtext here with Carrie Snodgrass, too, because her son that she had with Neil Young has special needs. I believe he has cerebral palsy, but I think he also had a brain aneurysm. And there's also this sort of context with Kevin, that Kevin to me seems like an autistic child. And this obsessive behavior with the ones and the zeros seems very much drawn from that world. That he's sort of locked into this alternate reality throughout, through the television. And it, I don't know if that was an idea that they developed and said that, well, that's just one too many balls to throw up in the air right now. Let's just imply that. But I very much get the feeling that is the subtext here, that Kevin is autistic.
That's an I hadn't considered that, to be honest. But like you say, it may be something they didn't want to overtly suggest.
Yeah, and the contract, you have this very vulnerable family. The daughter's a major behavior problem. She's got substance abuse issues. She's always running off. The kid is obsessive, possibly autistic. The mother is sort of the laughing stock of the town. So you set up this is what I'm saying about great writing. You set up this very vulnerable, almost marginalized family, and then you assault them. There's this horrific scene when these NSA stormtroopers just descend on their house and start smashing everything up. It's just like, it's so heartbreaking. This is why this is such a powerful episode, because, they are contrasting these ideas almost for maximum emotional impact.
I think that Conduit gets overlooked a bit, because I often hear people talk about the great, the pilot, Deep Throat, and Squeeze as the great episodes that open up the run, and then Conduit seems to get missed out a bit. So I think it's good that you've been able to redress the balance a bit today.
Oh, it's like a murderer's row of batters here. I think I see those first 4 episodes as of the same piece, and I very much see Conduit as a sequel to Deep Throat. You have a lot of the same ideas interacting on both episodes. Particularly that opening scene in Deep Throat, where you have these stormtroopers descend on this house, and you go in the house and there's this poor guy, who's all blistered and sweaty, and he's trembling on the floor. It's the same idea of aggressive force against vulnerability.
Yeah.
And what Gordon had said is that he saw alien abduction as a metaphor for sexual abuse and victimization. And that's what they were really trying to communicate in this story. And I think that's just what gives it such, I can't say enough. I think this is one of the top 3 episodes of the first season by far. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd rate it quite that highly, but I definitely agree that it's underrated. I would certainly say it's worth a look. If people skip this one on a rewatch, don't skip it next time, is what I would say. Okay then, well that's Conduit. Let's turn our thoughts then to The Jersey Devil.
Yes.
Okay, so The Jersey Devil is episode 5 of season 1, written by series creator Chris Carter and directed by Joe Napolitano. And this is the episode in which a homeless man is found dead and partially eaten near Atlantic City, which Mulder links to an old case. Okay, Chris, well this is an episode that gets a lot of flack. Is that criticism justified?
Well, I'll tell you what's justified is that it's very badly directed. there's absolutely no attempt to build up any tension or any sense of danger. When they're in that warehouse at the sort of the climax of this episode, you never get the sense that anybody is in danger. And I think that's a major fault. The director really should have been, quick cutting, cross cutting, using lighting. There should be more powerful use of the soundtrack and the musical cues. There's just it's so pokey and lazy the way it's executed. But I really see this as Chris Carter's attempt to do like a straight up, no holds barred Kolchak the Night Stalker episode. I mean, when I watched this, I was like, oh my God, this is the Night Stalker. It's, and the fact that Gregory Sierra, who was on television at the time, he was on, I believe he was on Sanford and Son and Barney Miller, but, sort of tying back to that era of television with the casting, which you see a lot throughout the X-Files history. I have a great deal of affection for this episode. I don't think by any means it's a classic. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to somebody who'd never seen the series before, but as just a fun sort of romp that really shows its colors as a Kolchak tribute, there is a lot of enjoyment here.
Yeah, I think there's a certain charm to these early episodes where they're still finding their way. And one thing that interests me here is that the stakes are quite small scale in comparison to a lot of episodes. I mean, here we've got a cover-up of sorts, but it's to protect the local casino trade, where we're accustomed, obviously, to cover-ups at a national level or an international level in the X-Files, but this is different.
Well, again, they're playing these beats that you'll see throughout the series. A cover-up is underway. There is a mystery of a kind of pseudoscientific nature, and there's also the conflict of Mulder and local law enforcement, which ends up with him being incarcerated.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, but like I said, the direction just fails it. I mean, the lighting here is it almost looks like an episode of Moonlighting. It's so dead on. Yeah. I mean, the key light is just so un-X-Files. It's so bright. It's so airy. It's almost like, when I think back on this episode, I see like little clouds of golden light just floating around. It's just so, I mean, there's no attempt to create a mood at all. And this story would live on and die on the spooky mood that you're in an alley and like, oh my God, what is that? And the way that whole scene is shot, you can barely see anything, and there's no build up. There's no tension being ratcheted up here. That entire sequence should have had like one quick cut after another. It just should have been bang, 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 bang. Mulder's, his eyes being shocked. Some shadowy figure closer to him than, halfway down the alley. I mean, that's like what I'm saying. I think there's a decent story in here somewhere that just failed in execution.
I get the sense that if David Nutter had been handed this script, perhaps some of the things you mentioned would have come to fruition.
Yeah, I think Nutter would have been the man for this script. I mean, this would have been right up his alley. I have such a well of affection for the first season. I was the guy who was like waiting with bated breath, for 9:10, for 9 o'clock, because I had been watching all the ads on Fox at the time. And I was just like, oh, I am so there. And I was not disappointed by the season. I mean, even Space, for the time, it was all obviously very poorly done. But for the time, I just thought it was amazing. But Jersey Devil, there could have been a pretty decent story here, and the idea of evolution and survival of the fittest and things like that. And so this heavy-handed, eco-propaganda that we see.
Yeah, obviously we've criticised the direction. One of the things the script does repeatedly is draws these parallels between human behaviour and animal behaviour. And one of the places it does that is this scene where Scully's at her godson's birthday party, I think it is. We've got this subplot with Scully's domestic life and then later the date that she goes on. And it leads, obviously, to Scully deciding that she's better off throwing a lot in with working with Mulder.
They wanted to show the life that Scully was sacrificing to work with Mulder.
Yes.
That was the intent. And for me, I was like, she was leaving behind the most boring life you could possibly imagine. I mean, that date was just like chewing tinfoil. It's like, oh my God. I mean, Andrew Airley is a great actor. He's been in practically everything.
Yeah.
Wonderful actor. And he really does a great job of portraying probably the dullest man that you've ever met. I mean, you just want to, like, she can't get out of there fast enough. So, I mean, if they're trying to portray this as a life that she's sacrificing, oh my God, look what she's giving up for Mulder. It's like, no great loss, kids.
Yeah, and he appears later in the series, I think in the episode Sanguinarium, I think, as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a come down after you've gone on a date with Scully, I think. But
yeah, absolutely. Boy, does she look, I mean, both these episodes, Gillian Anderson just looks amazingly beautiful, especially Conduit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she also looks like she's about 19 years old, which is kind of interesting. She does not look like a doctor by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, Chris, as a New Jersey resident, as you are, what can you tell me about the folklore of the Jersey Devil itself and how closely this episode aligns with it?
Not even in the same ballpark.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
Oh, first of all, the Jersey Devil is like, it's kind of like a flying horse, bat. It's a monster.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a Neanderthal. I mean, I guess they were trying to sort of shift this over to the whole Bigfoot mythos, but that's not the Jersey Devil. I mean, the Jersey Devil is actually, the folklore is really kind of interesting, and there's a deeper sort of subtext here because it was originally called the Devil of Leeds, and it was this family that lived in the Pine Barrens that was really, at a time when everyone was hyper fundamentalist Christian. I mean, this Leeds family were really interested in sort of esotericism and the occult. So there's a lot of religious politics at work, with the Jersey Devil. I mean, it's interesting because the supposed father of the Jersey Devil is a guy named Daniel Leeds, and he almost comes across as sort of like the 17th century Mulder. He's all wound up in all these sort of occult and esoteric ideas. So there's an interesting subtext here that has to deal with, almost like the Salem witch trials kind of hysteria. The real Jersey Devil is absolutely nothing like what we're seeing. I mean, not even close. It's kind of comic.
And New Jersey will be the setting for a more memorable X-Files monster, won't it, in season 2? Because I believe the host is set in New Jersey. Is that right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be set in Newark, and in Newark that looks amazingly like downtown Vancouver. But it's interesting though, because one of the things I really like about the first season, and maybe the first two seasons, but definitely the first season, is that they use the city as a character. They really got a tremendous amount of production value out of the locations of the actual city, not just the suburbs or the forest reserve where they did all those wood scenes. You really get a sense of the city, and I think that's something that I have a tremendous amount of affection for because it's a beautiful city. It's a city with a tremendous amount of character. They really exploited that, and I think that's what added so much of that early season magic is how they use the city.
Yeah, well, Chris, you're going to be back with me talking about a couple of other season 1 episodes before too long, and we might get the chance to talk about the use of the city there.
One of the things in the early seasons that I think a lot of people overlooked is how adamant David Duchovny was about having his girlfriends cast in the series. Because the woman who plays the Jersey Devil was his girlfriend at the time, Claire Stansfield.
Yep.
And also we had Maggie Wheeler in Born Again, who played the detective. And we also had Perry Reeves in 3. Also Dana Wheeler Nicholson in Syzygy.
Okay, yep.
So, boy, this guy really got around town.
Yeah, well, finding gainful employment for people you're close to. There's something to be said for that, I think.
Yeah, very close to.
Right, tomorrow on the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, the episodes under discussion are Shadows and Ghost in the Machine. In the meantime, if you want to find us on Twitter, we're at the X_cast. If you are on Facebook, you can find us there too. We've got a page, and we've also got a Facebook group, which is called X-Files Basement, the Xcast Podcast Fan Group. So if you search for Xcast, you'll find us. Until next time, listeners, though, trust no one.